That brings us right to our promoting a culture of collaboration and authentic learning.
Fantastic. So I am going to very briefly speak. I will actually call up Mr. Alexis. I want to welcome everyone here tonight. I'm very excited to hear everything you have to say, especially as I've seen the presentation, and you know, it was a collaborative effort in putting it together. But you know, as I said to all of you, it's much more exciting to hear you talk about what you actually did from your firsthand experience than to just hear me report to the board. So number one, I really appreciate you all coming tonight. I know some of you are doing double duty. Some of you, you know, this time of year you have something probably every single night for the next couple of weeks. So I really do appreciate you taking the time and share the wonderful work you've done this year. Our last board meeting, we had the precursor to this presentation where we had our committee co-chairs from the strategic plan come and speak about the work they've done around the strategic plan goals. And I had promised everyone that they would get the second part of that tonight, where we're really talking about goal 3, the creative, innovative, and interdisciplinary learning. And I know tonight we have a strong focus on the interdisciplinary piece, where we have our department supervisors, as well as some staff members, as well as some students speaking firsthand about their experiences. So I'm really very excited to hear what you have to say, as I know the board members are as well. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Alexis.
Thank you, Ms. Chair, and thank you, members of the board. It's great to be back. At the last meeting, we talked a little bit about not just the strategic plan goals, but also the vision that's shaped and informed our work, and that is well aligned with the strategic plan. As Ms. Jewett said, we were focusing tonight mostly on that third goal about integrating creative, innovative, and interdisciplinary learning throughout our program here at the high school. And I'll just review a couple of important points. Last week we talked about what is really at the heart of the vision for learning in 2017 at Watchung Hills, and that's a culture of inquiry. A culture of inquiry that provides opportunities to students to use critical reasoning and creativity in collaboration with their peers and with their teachers to solve problems, and to really help students and the adults come to a better understanding of the relevance of the academic skills by placing them in real-world contexts, in authentic contexts. And so at this time last year, we started planning ideas for providing opportunities for the faculty to begin working more so on interdisciplinary learning. We set up joint meetings over the summer that would take place in the fall. So departments that maybe previously hadn't met before, like math and social studies, had planned meetings. And then midway through the year, we also designed a pilot to take the second department meeting. We have 2 department meetings a month and a faculty meeting. And for the second department meeting from December through March, we created just an opportunity for some of the partnerships that were emerging in these departments to have time to collaborate and to work on projects that kids could immerse themselves in, and really come to understand that, you know, as we all know, in the adult world, we don't have artificial boundaries. In schools, traditionally, we have departments, and they are content-driven, and they're what we call disciplines, and we learn and grow within those disciplines, but we're trying to move beyond those boundaries. And so tonight, we're going to talk a little bit, you're going to hear directly from the teachers and the students and the supervisors about some of the goals and ideas and the experiences that emerge from this collaboration. We begin with, in many ways, a metaphor, the musical that took place in early April. And I'm going to invite Mr. Doug Eaton, our theater teacher, to come forward and talk a little bit about how the musical and some of the events surrounding it became really a wonderful interdisciplinary experience for our students and our faculty.
I'm glad to see that Mike Hess is here today, and the tall people are represented.
You got the dance, too.
I just want to, I wrote everything down here. I just want to explain a little bit about what I do and in relationship to this great musical and how much fun we had and what we learned. So I'm going to read this, and it represents some of my philosophies about what I do and what we do here. Since I began teaching, my mission has been to enable students to apply the teamwork and problem-solving skills learned in the theater to other aspects of their academic and professional life, and I think that's what we're talking about here. It is my fervent belief that theater and the performing arts promotes the highest degree of interdisciplinary collaboration, critical thinking, which is something I talk about all the time in my classes and with the students in the shows, creativity and authentic learning needed to pursue any career. It is interesting to know that many of the students who are in or work in our productions have come from our music, theater arts, and acting classes. They're wonderful classes, and Mrs. Bird right now is ready to go on with all those wonderful kids that are in the concerts tonight. It is my belief that theater and the performing arts allow students to learn better while doing, and I think that's important. That's something that I was always good at, doing something. I felt that I always became better at it. I'll give you a little rundown of what I do and what some of the students did, and also the teachers. As Director of Beauty and the Beast, I'm responsible for the set design, staging, acting, and the artistic concept of the show. Working with Chris Valenti, the set is built and then painted by Kate Griffin and her students. Angela Bird expertly worked. We did something a little bit differently this year. Angela worked only with on the vocal aspects of the musical, as she also guided students through final rehearsals, working with them on dynamics, pronunciation, and musical nuances. And this year, Paul McCullen then took over conducting the talented pit orchestra. With enormous enthusiasm and talent. That combination, all three of us, it seemed like it just worked very well. Angela had more time to work with students on the vocals, and Paul did a great job with the orchestra and what we had to do with that. It was a complex score. With cast and crew of just about 150 students, Beauty and the Beast enabled all these areas of learning to come together in one spectacular event. I tell people that all these stars were in alignment for this, for some reason or another. Put that phone.
See, all people know to have a phone off in the theater, right?
Yeah, that's true. Every script and production, including the fall play. Fall play is, we did Peter Pan this year. Again, very complex, but it came off very well, and I'll talk about Diane and how we work different things out for that. All these productions are mounted in a professional and collaborative manner, using student leaders in the following capacities. I have Victoria Magali here tonight. She's really the only student that can be here and talk about some of these things briefly, but she is here. But this encompasses student assistant directors, student stage managers, all students, student set crews, student prop masters and crews. In fact, I have but there are a number of students going to school now for either props or stage management. I talk to them all the time that technical theater is something that's a viable place where you can get a job. Student costume crews that work with Gail DeSico, student lighting operators that work with Chris and Nick, student sound operators, student actors, and student musicians. Again, I'm going to have Victoria talk a little bit of something about what she does. She is an actress, and then I'll introduce Diane Krutz, who this year we were able to and I thought it was great. Diane Krutz took over the business management aspect of all this, and we came up with a lot of great ideas, and she did. So I'll introduce her after Victoria is done.
I can hardly begin to speak on behalf of my friends who are rehearsing at chorus right now, who are on Script and Cue Council. Can everyone hear me? Okay. And all they've done this year. But I can say that at the beginning of this year, Script and Cue kind of reorganized itself, and I was treasurer. And when I was told I was treasurer, I kind of freaked out a little bit because, this club is it's kind of a unique experience because it's a club where we put on these productions that bring in a lot of revenue, but also have a lot of expenses. And I can tell from my 4 years with Script and Cue that we always had this vague notion of our funds and what we could do with our funds and exactly what they were. And I saw people using their own money to, in small ways, to maybe buy some makeup for the shows or to help put on social events. And this year, like, that completely changed, and because Mrs. Kretz, like, sent me a spreadsheet of the Script and Q financials, and I was like, oh, like,
You just made Mr. Seitz very happy.
and it was amazing to just be able to go on there and just understand what was happening, and especially because the timing was such up when we get this money and when we like write our checks was such an important aspect that I never understood before. And because of that, we were able to have a Script and Q this year where I think for the first time, maybe since my freshman year, we were able to have events that weren't just, you know, for people who like wanted to do like hardcore acting all the time or wanted to do these big productions, but who were interested in theater and would have a great time at any of the events we did, whether it was just like a small get-together on the weekends or like a workshop with like some aspects of theater. And Kathleen, our vice president, she especially did such a great job collaborating with everyone in the accounting club. There were points when we were working out like marketing or creating a t-shirt like multiple times throughout the year, and I would send an email to Mrs. Kretz, and then I would go see Mrs. Kretz and talk about something, and then Mr. Eaton would be like, oh, what about this aspect of it? And then I would just be able to, for the first time, text Kathleen or text Chris Berry, and every single person I ever got in contact with was so on the ball, and they knew what was happening because Mrs. Kretz was having these meetings all the time. And I don't know, it's kind of like Mr. Eaton was saying with the stars being, you know, all aligned for Beauty and the Beast. You know, it wasn't just fate or whatever. I'm getting weird, but I really think that every success that Script and Q had this year, and there were a lot, was because of this collaboration and because of these specific people coming together and communicating for the first time in this way. So, thank you.
I'm going to give you a brochure of Script and Q, just so you can take it home, read about it, you know, keep it by your bed table. So anyway, I also want to mention something. I want to thank Dan Bertelli too, who is our supervisor, and we work collaboratively to get these things going, and I think they're extremely successful. Also want to mention Steve Spini and his is it Graphics 3, who always do the graphics for the posters, and we go and again collaboratively. Mr. Bertelli went, I went and spoke to him almost as if we were his client, and then the students took over and worked on the posters. So and I think they came out beautifully. So I really want to. I'm going to finish, but I really want to say I can't say enough about Diane, and I'm going to turn it over to her. But I think. You know, her and her finance students, she's taught her finance students so well. The finance students worked on all of this with the Script and Q students, and it just came out, as Victoria said, just spectacularly. And I truly believe now that we can do anything. It's just worked very well this year, and it was all because of this collaboration and getting along and getting things done. So I hand it over to Diane.
So first off, I'm just really excited that Victoria, who hasn't studied accounting, used both the words revenue and expense. So that's the thing that correctly, by the way, too. So awesome. So when the opportunity presented itself for me to become the business manager for Script and Q, honestly, I had no idea what that meant. Really didn't. But I started to ask some questions to different people, and right away started to see, that's not necessarily something I need for me, but I think that's something I need for them, the students, because if I'm always trying to get ways in the classroom to bring things to life and to bring things real, make things more authentic. So it seemed like the perfect way that I can get them involved, run the Script and Q production like a business in terms of the financing and the marketing and the merchandising that comes with that. So I floated the idea through a few of my students to just see if there was an interest in that. Right away, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of interest. breakfast. So I started to have these meetings at lunch, and then I'm going to bring Sydney up actually right away. Sydney was the student who came with me to our first meeting with Mr. Eaton and the Script and Q Club and Kathleen Stivoli. And I would like Sydney to kind of talk you through the highlights of the year and bring in the different students as they kind of fit into this whole picture. So, Sydney.
Thank you. When Ms. Kratz first came up to me and presented me with this opportunity, I was like, at first, like a little scared. Like the Script and Q, like does have a lot of money coming in and coming out. So I sat in this first meeting with my notebook and I was like, okay, what are your revenues besides your ticket sales? What are your main expenses? Are you separating your drop expenses from your prop expenses? Which are words that I was like, why are these separated? I don't know this. And that really shows like the collaboration that had to happen. Like lumber goes into prop and it goes into drops and it goes into sets and everything. So it was me getting to understand like what the play business is about and using my finance experience to then gather my team of accounting students, which is about over 20, and I separated them into teams so everyone could focus on something. And then after Peter Pan finished, we switched the teams, so now you had a new way of thinking. So it was merchandising, marketing, cash flows, then you had your internal control and the people who did the finances to the general journal, the ledgers, posted it, made the income statements, and budgeting. So at first it was like the first meeting, figuring out what was happening, and then we moved on to like merchandising, and the people were like, we always sell t-shirts, and it's like, okay, what size t-shirts, how much do you sell them for, do you make a profit, do we have a record of this? No. Okay, let's see where we go from here. And then another merchandising idea was to sell popcorn, and then we crunched the numbers and noticed you need to sell that for $9 in order to not have a loss. So X the popcorn, we don't do that. The mess anyway. But it really, like, everything, the collaboration, like, again, we have Script and Q people talking about, like, revenues, noticing that there is a business aspect, and, like, the Beauty and the Beast is really a metaphor for this collaboration, and I loved every moment of being a part of this and being able to speak and always meet with like different students that like in my 4 years here I never met before, and really like get to know like their different perspective on what high school brought them and how we can work together and really make something meaningful. So moving on to like marketing, digital marketing became a huge thing because like that's especially part of society today. And the graphics team did so great, like everyone saw this around town. And one of our big things moving into Beauty and the Beast was we had the idea, me and Ms. Kratz, for Breakfast with Belle, to reach out to the community, give back to the kids. And we were like, okay, so food-wise, what's happening? And my friend Sonali started the culinary club last year, and I was like, well, why are we gonna cater when we have a culinary club? Like, we have people that wanna do it, let's bring them in and have them get the real-world experience also. So I'll pass it over to her to talk about her experience with Breakfast with Belle.
So when Sydney first came to me with this idea, it was pretty early in the year, but I was very excited about it because it was the first big event that the Culinary Club was going to do, and I was excited for an excuse to bring together all these people and, you know, see what we could make of ourselves. So we had our initial meeting, and Ms. Phelan told me, you know, make a budget and pitch it to me, and I made my very first budget and pitched it to Ms. Phelan. She said, okay, go ahead. And so we started organizing the club into teams. We had one team that would make sure that we had all the supplies and make sure that we could take care of, you know, 100 people that were expected at this event. We had one team that would organize the schedule for how we're going to make the food and where we're going to make it. And boy, you should have seen my kitchen for the week before that event. And so we really had to come together, and eventually we realized that there was going to be 75 kids running around in this library, so we had to you know, get some arts and crafts and some things for them to do, and we realized we need some outside volunteers as well, so we got the peer leaders to come collaborate with us and help to manage the kids. And overall, we had a really great event. We had over 100 people show up. We had the Culinary Club here early in the morning, cooking all the food and making sure it stayed warm in the heaters, and it was recycled stocked, and we had, as you can see in these pictures, we had over 100 people there. So it was a big success, and I would say that we learned a lot about organizing an event and planning for it. We worked with buildings and grounds. We made sure that everything was set up. We worked with script and cue to make sure that the characters would be here and entertaining the kids and taking photos with them. We worked with the accounting club to make sure that we kept track of our finances. We stayed on budget, and we turned our receipts in at the end, and we got our reimbursement. So that was my first time having a big event, and personally I learned a lot, and I know the kids in my club have learned a lot, and I hope to do the same thing next year, over and over. We're now approaching our third big catering event this year, and I think that overall this has been a great learning experience for everyone in my club. And I'm sure that all these people feel the same way, so I'll turn it over now.
So aside from marketing and merchandising, we also clearly did a lot of financial work. So since script and cue and the plays always, your revenue isn't till the end, you had to have your expected income statements and balance sheets and whatnot, as well as your, in the end, what did you actually make? So in order to have all the expected, we needed to crunch numbers, and we had another team for that really wanted to do the back end of the work, as they would say in business terminology. So they really and I was in all these meetings going through these binders that they used to keep, so it was never automated. They had these big binders of every single year, looking what is our average expenses over the past 5 years for this play. The winter and the spring is always more. And so to do all that and then set our budgets for this year, which was a reason why that the play was such a big success this year, I think, was we were really involved in every aspect of it, from merchandising, marketing, and budgeting. So our main, I was really more the front of the house and the project management, whatnot, but the person that led the back of the house was John, so he'll speak about that.
Good evening, everyone. I helped lead a lot of the things going on in the back end for all the accounting and everything. There's a lot of collaboration going on, so it was a really good experience. Majoring in accounting next year for college, this definitely helped a lot.
I'm having a good night. You guys are really I'm going to cry when I love this. It's great. I'm so glad. It's wonderful.
So this whole experience was really good. It really brought a lot of the clubs together and everything, and it, as a whole, I think was very successful. So I worked with both Ryan and Chris. Yeah, I worked with both Ryan and Chris with a lot of the financials. So I'll show you that on the screen. Alrighty. Okay.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Biggs, and I work with John as well with the accounting system. And John and I, usually we get an email from his Crux, usually out of the blue, can you come in and help us with stuff? I'm like, we're like, yeah, sure, we'll come in, because we're seniors, we don't have a lab, our lunch is very flexible, so we come in and we spend the whole lunch period talking over what we need to do, and then we usually fill out, she gives us invoices, and we fill out what we do, we put the account number in there, and then Vineet over here on the right helped us set up an accounting system that made it much more efficient to post stuff. So we put ones there, and it'll just automatically do it, and then so it'll save us so much time, and then we'll just forecast what we need to do next time, and we'll do next time. So it's a pretty great experience to actually apply my knowledge, what I learned in accounting with Mrs. Grutz, and then use it in a club. And so I was I always wanted to join a club in high school. And I was and then she said the accounting club was starting. I was oh, cool, I'll join this one. And then it actually worked out one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. So.
We were also able to look at each production and find out what was our revenue and expenses for each production, as well as figure out what our net income was. As you can see here's our comparative income statement, and we could, as you can see, we were able to track each revenue and expenses separately, and which then came together collectively. you could see that Peter Pan, while it did produce not as much revenue and didn't have as much expenses, so it eventually came out to have about very similar amount of net income. Also to note, our net income on Beauty and the Beast, while it doesn't include one expense that should be in there, which was the playwrights. So at the end, both net incomes were about the same, which was very interesting for knowledge that can be used next year in deciding budgeting in terms of how can we decrease our expenses, how can we increase our revenues, to have both shows become more profitable.
So, since this is all done for this year, we have closed since this time, and we're starting to prepare for next year. We're starting to open up our financials for 2017-2018, and we're creating new jobs and everything to help organize for all this. So I'll hand this over to Sydney.
So we're all seniors here, so it's like a little sad, a little happy. We definitely left our mark, and like there was a lot of juniors that were part of the accounting club and really wanted to get more involved the next year as they saw what we all did. So I wrote up with the help of all of them to describe what we did in making job descriptions. And next week we have interviews for all the kids that want to get involved, because we said this is something like that's real. It's not something you're going to sit in a meeting at lunch and not really do something. You always do have to be involved, and like the experience you can get from this, I said, like, it's insurmountable. It's like amazing. I'm so happy to have been a part of this, to have created this my senior year. And yeah, so as the club moves forward, I'm glad Ms. Krutz will still be here at least, and we created all these jobs. But lastly, besides Script and Q, we now also want to help as many people as we can notice the business end and the budgeting aspects of no matter what industry you're in. So we have Vinny, who also helped us automate our accounting system, who's having a TEDx next week, in 2 weeks? 2 weeks, yeah. And so we're helping him look at his budgeting for that, and he'll talk more about that event that he's hosting.
Thank you so much.
Have to go to this.
Mr. Size is going to show up at lunch tomorrow. You guys just
Currently, I'm the lead organizer for a TEDx event that's being held at Watering Hills on June 19th from 6 to 9 p.m. It's called TEDx Youth at WHRHS. We're primarily making it to help inspire a culture of innovation and collaboration within the Watering Hills community. And we're primarily doing it using the TEDx model, because we have a lot of speakers who sort of exemplify the idea both within and outside of the school. So currently our theme for this year is Innovate, Inspire, Empower. And to that end, we're bringing in speakers who've worked on interesting robotics projects. We're bringing in speakers who have good lessons about mentorship, speakers who've created massive social media movements. We've sort of expanded our reach to include not just Watering Hills, but the surrounding community. And we hope to get more involved with the community in the future, maybe even hold TEDx conferences annually or biannually, so that we can encourage this sort of culture of innovation and collaboration within Watering Hills. Any questions so far?
And we need, once you have the file information for that night, I'll share it with board members too.
Yep.
I just want to say thank you for giving the students the opportunity to talk about their experience. And I'm going to turn it over to the next presenter. Mr. Brittel.
Thank you, Doug and Diane, and all the students. We're looking forward to putting the students to work again next year, where the play is going to be Dracula and the music will be Guys and Dolls. So I think we just tapped the surface on how many kids we can actually get involved to experience some real authentic learning. So I think it's a really great tool, the Script and Q Club. So I'm going to just shift quickly to the Arts and PE department goals. Some of the goals our teachers came up with at the beginning of the year were the Arts and PE staff were going to launch a peer-to-peer mentor program. And Ms. Angelastro talked about at the last meeting how we moved health into the first marking period of the class, of the freshmen will be in health first marking period. And we think that's a great opportunity to use the peer leaders in the school with the, pair them up with the seniors and the freshmen in health to kind of work like maybe once a month together, maybe bring them together during lunchtime to discuss some of the different kinds of situations that they'll be encountering in high school. So that is one of the goals, and that's another way. I'm just going to kind of combine the two slides. I have one of the goals and then how we're accomplishing them. The second goal for our arts department was to kind of create pathways for all of the students to kind of plan their 4 years at high school. A lot of times I will get approached by a junior or a senior saying, I didn't have the opportunity to take fine arts too, but I really want to go to fine arts, AP arts. So what the arts staff did and the music staff is they kind of created a pathway for the freshmen and the guidance counselors to kind of look at once they come into high school to be able to plan, if they're interested in art and going to college in art, to plan their 4 years out so they could really experience as much as possible, prepare themselves as much as possible for to prepare themselves for college. Another goal the PE department came up with was implement Wellness Wednesdays, which is all these things are going to start in September. Wellness Wednesday is an idea where every Wednesday, the first Wednesday of every month, all of the PE students would come together during each period and either have a big yoga session or maybe a speaker on nutrition or a scavenger hunt outside or some kind of stress relief program. So, because one of the strategic plan goals is just wellness, and I think the arts and the PE staff are a perfect candidate to kind of introduce those to the students. So those are 3 different ways we're going to be implementing those in September. Okay. As far as our interdisciplinary learning goes, we teamed up with Mr. D'Alessio along with a couple of other departments. The arts and PE department worked mainly with science. And we had a lot of great lessons, and I wish I could explain them all to you now. Everything from the ceramic students learning how glaze works, the compounds of glaze and how when you introduce them to heat, what colors they turn, or from the art students examining under a microscope to try to be inspired by abstract, to create abstract art. But is Mr. Bird, so I'm gonna bring Mr. Bird up here, and he collaborated with many of the teachers, one of them being his wife, who is on stage now singing, I'm sure is eagerly waiting to go up there, so I'm gonna stop talking. Mr. Bird studied how sound waves are formed in your throat, so I'm gonna just let him do all the talking.
Thank you very much.
Take it away, Mr. Bird.
Thank you very much for having us here this evening. It's a pleasure to speak in front of this group. My collaboration group was with Chris Wendell, teacher of physics, with Paul McCullen, teacher of instrumental music, Mrs. Bird, who is the choir director, and myself. So we find time to collaborate and talk about things across disciplines frequently. So we found a natural home for combining our disciplines, music and science. It was an undergraduate minor of mine as well. So utilizing our physics teachers and utilizing the music, we were able to connect these isolated islands of information. So this slide tells a visual story of how we went about this in 1 hour with all of our classes for Mr. Wendell, Mr. McCullen, Mrs. Bird, and myself. Most of us probably learn of sound as a wave and its nature to transfer energy from one point to another. The waves that we are hearing right now, they're often very much more complicated than that. What we're using is that colorful tool at the bottom. That's a spectrogram that can give you a live representation of sound. So we can see frequency changing over time, and we can see multiple vibrations occurring at once. So if you are a instrumentalist, you will call that a harmonic or overtone. In speech sciences, they call those formants. This could be utilized everywhere from looking at animal communication to a music studio and many other areas as well. So we're talking about the nature of simple waves and how they combine to constructively interfere or destructively interfere and how they would cancel out. that has a musical impact as well. How those waves combine, we perceive as having a certain timbre, pitch, tone, whether it is pleasing or whether it is displeasing. So the center image above that colorful line shows all the intervals that are discussed in music theory. The circles there show where the harmonics overlap, and the ones that have the most overlapping, the octaves, tend to be the most pleasing to the ear. The ones that are most dissonant are the ones that do not overlap with their harmonics. So we're taking a look at many different ways of constructive and destructive interference. This has many implications for many different industries. The lower left image is a picture of a concert hall, and a concert hall blends art and science every single day. Looking at the acoustics of our own room, we're able to take a look at where waves are combining constructively and destructively. So using the spectrogram, we had individuals playing different instruments, students playing their instruments, and whether it's just a mouthpiece, a flute, an oboe, the piano, the human voice, how do these different instruments compare with their nature of sound? And looking at that nature of all of these different ones. We also talked about how they combine in other aspects. The upper right is a video that's showing Steven Tyler undergoing some laryngeal surgery backstage, because Steven Tyler has money to do that. So if he had vocal nodes or polyps on his larynx, those waves would not constructively form pleasing sounds. So we made it a connection back to the material for our students that way. So we talked about the anatomy of the larynx, how our ear hears, and the physiology of how we hear different frequencies with different amplitudes as well. So that's perceived. This also has amplifications or implications in computer science as well. That chaos that's in that lower colorful graph is what is hitting our ear, frequency versus time graphs, every second of every single day. So that messy data is really being interpreted live by our own ears. And it makes a difference whether it's my voice with a deeper tone talking or someone with a higher tone saying the same words. The ratios between those harmonics would change. So people studying computer science have to use machine learning to take a look at the ratios between those different parts of the frequencies and say, well, this clumping here means this is an A vowel, an E vowel. And when our Alexa or Google Home is looking at this, that is the ratio and analysis that they are doing in real time. And that summarizes our collaborative lesson. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Carl. Next up, I'm going to bring up Tara Geschman. Tara was, and her students are very gracious enough to kind of share her kitchen and special services with our foods classes this year. And I think it gave birth to a very nice collaboration, which she's going to explain to you now.
Good evening. So our lesson was on cellular respiration. I worked with the biology and the culinary arts teachers. So on the first day, let me see, I'm going down. On the first day, my life skills students shop for the experiment materials and ingredients. So you can see sometimes my students like to have a little fun in their pictures, and you can see them purchasing the items. And then on the second day, the students started out by conducting their experiment on cellular respiration. They learned that as the yeast cells perform cellular respiration, carbon dioxide is released, which makes the balloon blow up. This experiment helped the students make the connection between the process of cellular respiration and the dough rising. And then on the next day, which was the best part, the students got to bake and enjoy, oops, I'm sorry, I apologize. Wow. Okay, so on the next day, the students got to bake and enjoy eating their pizzas. And I made a little video of you to see them working together.
Just make sure you expand it to the full screen.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of in the right corner. Yep.
Thank you.
This is why we all were visiting the kitchen over there. This is when you had quite a lot of students in that room.
I did think about it, I did. It wasn't positive.
You can't just show that made more.
Sorry, this was when we had the classes sharing that room, correct?
Right. And we had biology in there, so there was a lot more.
So we had culinary arts, life skills, and biology all together making pizza.
Over 3 days. But you could truly see like the students helping one another with their hands, showing my students what to do and, you know, guiding them along.
Oh, that looks good.
They're serving each other. Best part.
Thank you, Ms. Skekman.
And a little personal experience about this lesson. The other day I was at my daughter's t-ball game, and a friendly girl working at the snack shack approached me and said, "Do you teach life skills at Watch on Hills?" I replied, "Yes." A little shocked, but yes. I said, "Oh." She said she remembered me because she was in the cooking class where we did this lesson on cellular respiration. She went on to tell me how much she really enjoyed the lesson because she bonded with some of my life skills students, like naming their names and everything, like, "Oh, I say hi to them all the time." This touched my heart because it meant to me that this lesson wasn't only just about the academic or the cooking component, but it was also about life, about meeting new people and creating bonds with others, even if we learn in different ways. Thank you so much for your time. I'd like to introduce Mr. James Aquavia.
The first time.
People need a lot of reinforcement.
Here we are. Good evening. Our goals this year in the English department were to increase opportunities for cross-curricular learning and to prepare students for post-secondary learning. Cross-curricular interdisciplinary work generated a lot of energy among English faculty and students alike. The English department hosted the Folio Literary Magazine Coffee House. It was an evening event that took place January 25th. It coincided with the publication of the winter issue of the literary magazine, Folio. It was a cross-curricular experience for students focused on spoken word, students' own writing, but it also included singer-songwriters, a cappella vocalists. It included dance as well. It was a well-attended event with strong feedback from students. Folio editors characterized the event as a space for student voice. The English department also hosted a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, performed by the Shakespeare Theater of New Jersey. This took place just Wednesday, May 24th, in the Performing Arts Center, a cross-curricular event that brought in well over 100 students for an engaging production of the play, followed by Q&A with actors afterwards. We had very strong feedback from students, many of whom enjoyed seeing a comedy for the first time, and we thank the PTO for their support, their financial support of this event. Cross-curricular interdisciplinary learning and project work among English faculty started with a meeting with the history department in October to read student writing and examine patterns in student writing. We looked at strengths and we looked at areas where we wanted to focus. This was followed by a meeting with the science department in November to share interdisciplinary project ideas. Teachers then reached out also to colleagues in the arts and a colleague in world languages also to develop a variety of projects. Several of these projects took the form of co-taught lessons. To list a few of them, an English teacher and a teacher of history taught a lesson focused on critical viewing and analysis of propaganda posters of World War I. It informed students' reading of All Quiet on the Western Front. An English teacher and a teacher of science formed a study group focused on definitions of race. They co-taught a lesson to inform students' reading of Art Spiegelman's Mouse, graphic novel Mouse. An English teacher and a teacher of science taught a lesson on scientific research of the early 19th century, and this informed students' reading of Frankenstein. A teacher of English and the ESL teacher taught a lesson focused on supporting ESL students' transition to mainstream English classes. Mr. Buehmiller is an English teacher who initiated a few cross-curricular projects, and he's here to talk with you about his collaboration with Miss Emily Jordan, a teacher in the arts department.
Good evening, Ms. Stewart, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity. A lot of these collaborations are very complex and incredibly impressive. Mine happened, I guess, a little more organically. I was here in the media center and speaking with Miss Emily Jordan, a fine arts teacher, and she mentioned she was doing a project on collage and was actually asking me for an interesting poem that could serve as sort of the basis for these collages, and of course I thought about the most complex and hard to understand poem I could think of, which of course is T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. It actually incorporates all 7 of what English teachers like to talk about as, parts of imagery, and that includes auditory, visual, tactile, olfactory, gustatory, kinesthetic, and organic images. I visited her class and we went over the poem with the students, knowing that they would eventually become incredibly cross-eyed and confused. And then it was her job to lead the students through how do we make sense of these images in words and reproduce them in a multimedia collage. Some of the examples of the student output was quite impressive. As I perused the gallery in the front part of the building, I could actually pick out the ones that were based on, a poem that I have loved for years, and it was a wonderful opportunity to see them work with their hands and scissors and glue and other things, rather than just, pen and paper. And I hope to do this sort of collaboration again. Thank you.
The English department also advanced the goal of post-secondary learning for students by engaging students in written analysis and synthesis of multiple sources for the documented writing they did during the first semester, their research assigned in English classes during the first semester, by adding works of pre-20th century fiction and prose nonfiction. That's ongoing work that we're doing. We're also starting to revise the 10th grade curriculum to increase rigor and prepare students for the more challenging coursework of grades 11 and 12, and by also conducting an evening college application essay workshop. That was just last Wednesday, the 31st. It started with a senior symposium. Seniors talked with juniors about their college application essay experiences. This was followed by small group sessions to read and examine successful student-written essays. Seniors did a wonderful job sharing their experiences and their insights about the college application process during that well-attended event, and I think successful event. Thank you. Ms. Anita Faldo will speak with you next about the Social Studies Department.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. First, I'm going to talk about the goals that we had for just the Social Studies Department, and then our collaboration with the Math and Business Department. We sort of pride ourselves in social studies on emphasizing acceptance and tolerance both through our content and just in our interactions with our students. So we wanted to take this a little further this year and do more sharing for those within the department, as well as offer an opportunity for others outside of the department to get ideas that they can use in their curriculum as well. So I'll just show you here sort of some of the things we've done. In the corner there is just kind of a snapshot of the Google documents that teachers from our department have put together and continue to add to give resources to teachers that they can use in their curriculum as well. The picture above it is one of our prize we talk about, as we heard in the beginning of this presentation, taking things like the accounting and the collaboration that was done with the musical beyond high school. Well, we were so proud to have two of our recent graduates go beyond what they experienced here in our courses and our extracurricular activities and get the word upstander into the Oxford Dictionary. And then Starbucks took that on and had it on their cups and everything. So that's certainly kudos to them and their teachers for taking what they got here and taking that beyond and continuing to work for wellness and acceptance and tolerance and diversity on a larger scale. The historical thinking skills is something we've been working on for the last several years, and trying to make sure that students, history is not just memorizing anymore. There are 9 specific skills that help them to think beyond, take the content and think beyond what they just read in a textbook or read in an article. It's very interesting because we just found out, we do this with all levels of our students, our AP, our honors, our A, our CP levels, so that they're all gaining this ability to think at different stages and at different levels. We just found out from the College Board that they're actually reducing the amount of skills that they're expecting students to know, including one that is kind of dear to our heart, which is synthesis. One of the hardest things to get students to do to really apply to real life situations. And we have vowed that despite the fact that on an outside scale, they're not emphasizing that as much anymore, we're going to continue to do that with our students here in the social studies department so that they can, beyond high school, think at these higher critical levels. And we do this with all lessons that we incorporate and the sources that we bring in and the analysis that we have students practice on a daily basis in all of our core courses and in our elective courses. Probably what was most interesting, though, is when we combined, and I'll bring up Mr. Twizzler with me as well, this was a shock to both of our departments, the math and the business and the social studies, when we said, we're going to be working together, because they saw no connection in the beginning. Even our brains, I don't think the same. We have different ways of going about things. And it ended up being extremely successful to the point where I think even when it's not formally done, a lot of them are going to continue to collaborate. And so just we'll kind of share together, and then we'll bring up a teacher from both of our departments to give you an idea of what they did. But we'll kind of go back and forth just to tell you some of the things that we did. I think most important that came out of this collaboration was that for the students, and the teachers, like I said, were a little shocked by the working together and how well it went, but for the students, they didn't see things in isolated compartments anymore. They realized that we actually, again, even though our brains work differently, we have to think the same in a lot of the things that we do, and that we're incorporating all kinds of information. And you don't just leave after 56 minutes from a history class and go to your math class and turn off your brain to what you learned in the history class, and vice versa. So probably the two most separated subjects in the minds of the students and the teachers ended up being, like I said, quite successful, and we were very pleased. So what you're going to hear from in a few minutes is a co-taught lesson on taxes. So I'll save that for Mr. New and Mr. Marco to tell you more about that. But just some of the examples, and again, like some others have said, we could go on and on about the great things that happened. But a lot of them took lessons they already did and added components. of the other's discipline. So again, they could see those connections, like talking about North Korea and the arms race, and then bringing in some of the mathematical concepts that went along with that.
Or the history of the SATs to understand the background of where the test originated, to give students an idea of why the data might be calculated the way that it is. It's a lesson that was already worked on in the probability unit, but now they tied in that history reference to give the students a broader idea of how the two might connect.
We had one situation where they didn't actually co-teach in the classroom themselves, but they all worked on the same topic, so that they were showing it from different angles, from a business angle, a mathematics angle, and a history angle. So the students kind of experienced, in this case, Supreme Court cases, and there were a few others, I think, that did it from that as well. So while they may not have had the students or the teachers together directly, they talked about how the students analyzed it from the different perspectives. So I think we'll bring up Mr. New and Mr. Marco, and they can share their exciting lessons on Texas. So Tim, this is for you again.
Good night, Tim.
I can't promise the same terminology that they used earlier. They're much more knowledgeable than me. When Anita mentioned that we were going to be working with the math department, I was ecstatic. Normally the way I handle math in my classroom, especially this lesson, is doing it all out ahead of time on my PowerPoint, leaving it up there and acting like I'm doing it in my head in that moment. But that's one of my secrets for the kids. To be honest, this is something, it was very organic, to use a word that was used earlier. I teach and have taught with, have had the good fortune to teach with Jeff Dielman for the past 4 years. And this is a lesson that we've adapted from a colleague of ours, Greg Binico, where we open by talking about what the purpose of taxes are, where they go towards both the state and the federal level, what are the responsibilities of individuals to pay taxes. And that's kind of an opening. It lasts 15 to 20 minutes, and then we take them through what the graduated income tax looks like. Then to bring in what Greg Binico has lended to us, he has created an insane amount of occupations and their actual incomes. So we assign the kids an income as well as an occupation such as a Starbucks barista, a teacher, Tom Cruise, an investment banker, whatever it might be. They take those and then they carry out what I view as the most difficult part of the lesson, which is doing the math and figuring out how much that person would pay in taxes. Now, it's at this point that normally we say, all right, take this, go do it at home for homework. We were lucky enough to have, ironically, Jeff's wife, Karen, and Anne-Marie come in this year and take them through calculating those individual taxes. And then we were able to discuss that with them the next day and talk about what different tax systems would look like. What would the impact be if we added another bracket? What would the impact be if we changed the percentages around? What would the impact be if we had a flat tax? And what those terms mean. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Anne-Marie and she'll talk about the things I don't understand.
Great job. Okay, hi, I'm Anne-Marie DeMarco, and I worked with Karen Dielman. And when we were preparing for our contributions to this lesson on taxes, we reviewed like the wealth of information. I have a beautiful packet which explains everything, and that the students received, and noticed that the math part referred to a YouTube video, which is what you just said. They took us home to do it. So I guess we were going to be their YouTube video live and in person. So being able to show them how the math works so that the students could understand that it really is an integral part of their understanding of the taxes and that why taxes are a part of life. It allowed them to then practice with their own real-world occupation, and some kids were happy to be the CEO of a company, and other kids were wondering why they got to be the low-level waitress or something that didn't make a lot of money, so they wanted to trade off and things like that, I think, when we were doing it to make all that money. But then the real-world practical part of this is that they don't really make all that money, and to try to see how the taxes were used, how to use percentages, how to figure out that it wasn't just one pot of money and how you had to break it up. And I think that doing it together with, as you said, there was 4 of us in the room going around after we showed them one real world example on how you have to break it up and using different tax systems to be able to compare, that doing that hands-on allowed them to see the real world examples, to relate them. And then after we did that, we did it a little bit before we did that, I think they did that part at home, was that Karen was up there showing them, okay, we've got the tax for this and we've got the tax for that, but the analysis and the critical thinking that had to go in to say which one was better, and to know that it wasn't just one percentage, that everyone didn't really pay the same percentage of their salary depending on where they fell into the graduated box. So to actually see how much, what percent of their money was paid in taxes, I think was a really integral thing, which allowed for the great discussion that you must have had the next day when we weren't in there. So to see which was better. So to continue, let's see, allowing them to practice to analyze their tax skills outside of the math classroom, because again, we were in their social studies classroom. And when we do this, this allowed us to be able to answer a question that I think I'm always getting is in my math class, like, you know, the little concentrated area that we are, which you mentioned, Anita, about how you're in isolation a little bit. Why do we have to learn this stuff? I get that all the time for one of the things that we're doing in math alone. Why do we have to learn this stuff? Well, here's a practical application as to why we have to learn this stuff. And being able to collaborate and work together as a team with Jeff and with Sean, I believe helped the students bridge that gap that Anita just talked about as to what they may perceive as their classrooms being taught in isolation, and we weren't in isolation that day because we were working together and bringing in those concepts together. So it was a great experience. Hope to do it again.
Okay, I think I'm turning it over to Mr. Twizzler now for math and business. Thank you.
So our department goals. Our first and primary department goal was to collaborate with social studies, as we just discussed. Secondly, was to get more technology into the classroom. We're going through some new initiatives now. We're going to have graphing calculators are going to be a responsibility of each family next year instead of the school providing them. So we were going through some moves this year to try and get our students comfortable with use of the technology. So on big exams like Park, it wouldn't be as big of a surprise. It broke my heart last year to watch a student take the Park and they didn't know where the X key was on the calculator because they hadn't spent enough time with it beforehand. So now this year we've made a lot of gains to be able to get the calculators in students' hands at all of our different levels to try and get them comfortable with them. We're looking for more student ownership of the content, and that's something we're still battling through to try and get the students to be more comfortable with understanding what they're doing. Evidence. So I work with a fantastic group of people, and by and large, the math and business folks are more than willing to go into social studies and offer their expertise and bring some of the content they're used to working with into the social studies classroom. But we're also very introverted people, and we didn't have a lot of social studies folks coming into our classrooms just because we don't like to socialize all that much as business folks. But I can tell you that the pedagogy conversations were out of this world. The folks getting out of their classroom and being able to look at how social studies runs their classroom created a lot of really interesting conversations about alternative ways of being able to do things. Get away from the sage on the stage kind of model and realize that you can run an entire class just by asking a question to students and seeing where it goes. So from that aspect, I think that interdisciplinary worked out really great because, as Anita pointed out, we have different minds, and so sometimes it's nice to get that glimpse into a different style of doing things to broaden out a little bit. So far as technology, we've played around a lot with trying to get use of the computers in the classroom. Our teachers have been working with programs like Kahoot to be able to do quizzes with students in both the math and the business classes. The math classes have been playing around with graphing software like Desmos and Wolfram Alpha. We spoke to a representative the other day, and we used our department time to have a webinar with a Wolfram Alpha representative to talk to us a little bit about the different programs that they can offer and different coding aspects that they can do through their program.
We've made great use of Smart Notebook. We've been using the symposiums for a long while now, but with the new use of the Smart Board, we've been playing around with some of the fun features of that, to be able to do a quiz through Smart Notebook, or be able to add animations or embed a GeoGebra app into the notebook to actually manipulate the graphics for a geometry class to see how things move around right there in the notebook. So for our student collaboration, we're making some advances in the use of group work and discussion in our classes. It's still something we're experimenting with. We're not masters of it yet, but I'm seeing in a lot more classrooms as we find ways to be able to get the kids to talk and hear a little bit more about what they're thinking and how they're understanding the topic. I'd like to introduce Mr. Comerford, talk about world language.
The down button, right? Good evening. We started out the year by identifying three goals that we were hoping to achieve. The first one being the cross-disciplinary with other content areas. Second one, trying to find different pathways to success for students after they completed another year of world language. And then finally, we were taking a look at strategies for implementing different assessment strategies and tests as an indicator to our performance, as much as our programs are concerned and our students' progress. If you take a look at this graph, we had a wide variety of activities this year in world languages. We pretty much had something with every department in the building. The left-hand column, it tells you what department it is, and on the bottom, the number crosses how many teachers participated in that field. And to the right are some of the more specific details as to those different interdisciplinary activities. So it was everything from diversified language arts for ESL students, Zumba Latin dance that included French and Hispanic dance, healthy living. We had a geometry lesson in French. Our novice program students learned about Gaudi and the Catalan movement. We had a really good program with planning a budget for a trip that we did with Ms. Kretzen. We're going to do that again for next year. The students had to identify a country they'd like to visit and get there the cheapest way they possibly could by finding out online what it costs to get there using the local currency, changing it back to dollars. Some people chose to camp. Some people chose, once they got there, to find out what museums were free during the week. So the idea was to come up with the cheapest budget possible and to get the most for your money. And it became a pretty good contest altogether. It was very good. We also did one with aerodynamics. We'll be talking about that a little later in science. We were talking about the principles of flight, and then the idea was to create a paper airplane project. And again, in math, which is coming up next, we'll be talking about that with Mr. Kutch in more detail. And this year's program, by numbers, perhaps the largest one we did was the preschool Spanish lesson. This was something that was the brainchild of Mrs. Scherzer because of her elementary school experience, and she's taught elementary school for many, many years. The idea was to create a program for our Spanish students in the lower levels, levels 1 and 2, to see that they could actually do something with the material that they learned, that content, and apply it to another field, which in this case was child development. So we had 4 Spanish classes working with the child development students that are our high school students, and then our youngest warriors. So Mrs. Scherzer will come in and give you an explanation. As you can see, that is just child development and the child development students, not the Spanish students, but it was a fantastic program.
So as Mr. Comerford said, we wanted our beginning and lower intermediate language students to feel like they can use their skills in something other than Spanish class. And there is a unit that we start the year off with, which is called When I Was a Child, and they learn the past tense of one of the verb tenses that describes what they were like when they were a kid, and that's what kind of just the light bulb went off, and I said, when you were a child, we've got a whole group of children in this school in the child development area. So I approached Julie Duran and I asked her if she would like to collaborate as part of the collaborative effort, and she agreed. So we wanted to demonstrate how both the Spanish students and the child development students could apply their skills, both of their skill sets, to a real-world scenario by teaching a game in Spanish to the preschoolers. So one thing that our students had to keep in mind is that when you're teaching a language at that level, you're really just doing it at the word level. We're not expecting the preschoolers to become fluent after a day of teaching them, nor are we expecting them to understand complicated complicated directions in Spanish, but if they could at least learn a couple of words and then follow along the rules of the game using those words, then we thought that would be something that would be significant. So our goal was to get the preschoolers to understand a few words which relate to the game that they're learning. And the goal for the child development students was to write an effective lesson plan that incorporated Spanish into their curriculum. And this was, I found out, especially relevant this year because about a third of the preschoolers this year actually were of Hispanic descent, and a lot of them did speak Spanish in the home as well as English. So the two groups together would learn how to design an instruction, and then as elementary school teachers have to do, they have to present this to a large group of children. Okay, down key? All right. So the process that we used, Mr. Harabin, myself, Mrs. Duran, we worked together. I think we met about 5 or 6 times to just get some guidelines because there were about 40 Spanish students involved, about 25 child development students involved, and then you had about 25 preschoolers involved. So we formulated a couple of forms for them to use. The first thing we did is Mr. Harabin and I got our classes together, and they had to research what a typical culturally Hispanic childhood game might be. So they spent a couple of periods doing that, and what they found out, much to our surprise, is that most of the games that they play in the Spanish-speaking countries at that age level are very similar, if not the same, to the ones that we play here, just they call it different names. So they were tasked with writing up 2 or 3 different games, and then those games were presented to the child development team, and they were able to say to us, okay, well, based on what we know about our preschoolers this year, this might work, this might not work, because cognitively these kids might not be ready for this. And then everyone, I think we were in 6 teams, and everybody picked one game to play. So this gave both student groups an insight what a well-constructed game or a lesson plan needed to look like, because they actually, once our group got together and figured out the games, then the Spanish students got together with the child development high schoolers who taught them how to put this all into an effective lesson plan. That was really an interesting lesson because it was students teaching other students, and it was really nice to see how well they responded to each other. And then at the end, we wanted them to self-assess what went well, what didn't go well, et cetera. And they found out it was quite a challenge. So during the actual game day, we were in gym 3-4, all of us, and it got a little noisy and a little crazy, but we did it kind of like a round robin. So every 10 minutes, they would be in one station, one group would play their game, then we would call time, and then they would be escorted, the kids would be escorted to another group, and they would play the next game. There were, I think, 6 games played altogether. I'm going to show you, there were also 4 students in the child development group that were not the upper level, they were just beginning in child development. So I asked them to be the videographers during the test. So the clips are about 10 seconds each, and it's a little hard to hear the actual Spanish words, but the first one, the one that I'll show you, and then if you want, you can go on the other ones at your leisure and look at them. El Fútbol, which is really soccer in the United States. I had a couple of soccer players that absolutely wanted to teach that. So really what they taught was words like kick, goal, score, ball, and so they would say that, they would tell them to kick in Spanish, and they would kick, as you'll see, I'll play one of them for you, and you can tell for yourself.
If you click the corner, you can expand it so it's the full screen. Click the bottom right corner and it'll expand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
You're over by the time I do that.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so you get the idea. I think the other 2 games on here, one is Simon Diste, which is Simon Says, and the other one is Pato Pato Ganso, which is Duck Duck Goose. So it was kind of cute. So all the groups used their skills, and there was really quite a bit of benefit. there were very interesting feedback about what went well, what didn't go so well. I think there was a lot of learning that went on just in the students learning how to collaborate with each other, let alone learning how to collaborate with small children. I think they got a better appreciation for what it's like to be a teacher after this lesson. So, thank you.
Our second goal was to identify pathways to success, and we had 3 opportunities this year. The first was the World Language Honor Society. We inducted 302 students, one of the largest groups that we ever had, and these students maintained an A average over 5 and 7 semesters, so it was quite a feat. But we need to have them take advantage of what their national chapters offer, which are scholarships and grants and travel opportunities. So we're going to be working on that, sending them information this year and working on it next year to promote those ideas that they contact their national organizations and working through the national organizations with activities that we're going to create here at school. The second one is the Seal of Biliteracy. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that is now a program that New Jersey has decided that they are going to enter into. There are 25 states that buy into this. It's when you graduate from school, either your school, the district, or the state, and in the case of the New Jersey, it's the state of New Jersey. They give you a seal on your diploma and on your transcript that indicates that you have achieved an intermediate mid proficiency, which is what is considered proficient in the state of New Jersey in a world language, and of course in English. You can't get a diploma from a high school if you're not proficient in English. So the idea is that you could have more than one stamp if you studied more than one language, but we're looking at to see the viability of becoming part of the Seal of Biliteracy in New Jersey. The other one of the AP study opportunities that we have 2 new ones for next year. The first one is Chinese. We offered AP Chinese in 2005, and it's been a while, but we now have it back again because we have a middle school program that is feeding students in, and we can now bring back the AP Chinese, which we're hoping for because our students score very, very well on that AP test, and it's not an easy test. The other is Mrs. Grunther this year created a program and an intensive summer Italian immersion program through Montclair State University to allow our students, the idea was to allow our students to go from level 3 Italian, do the summer course this summer as a pilot program, and then come back in and do our first ever AP Italian course. We opened it through MSU to other schools, and it's going to run this summer. It'll be the very first time we're doing it, and we're hoping that it's going to be a tremendous success. There are quite a few students. We have 3 of our own in the program, but there are many other students throughout the state of New Jersey that are participating in the program. So those are our 2 AP opportunities. We also looked at strategies to improve performance, and 2 of those read to the whole idea of the Seal of Biliteracy. The first one is, that acronym is pronounced APPLE, and it's the ACTFL, which is the American Council of Teaching of Foreign Languages test, that is a performance-based test that lets you know exactly how well you do in each one of the skill areas: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. The STAMP test is a proficiency test, and it lets you know how well you fare in a real-world situation given the knowledge you have at this time. So we're using both tests as a pilot program. We're doing that right now. As a matter of fact, the students are doing it this week and next week. Given all the testing that we had to give them a little bit of a break, but they're doing that now, so we get the ideas at the end of junior year, where would our students fare on these 2 tests? And based on that information, we're going to take a look at and see how many of our students would then get the Seal of Biliteracy if that were the case. We also have digital portfolio. We've been doing this now for years, but since we switched over to Google Classroom, it's made it a lot easier. We keep examples, sample work of each student in each language, and we take a look at that over time, and we assess how well our students used to do with compared to how well our students are currently doing. We use that to tweak our programs and take a look at what a real Watch on Hill student could produce by the end of their 3 or 4 years here with us. And that gives us some insight as to how we stand compared to other schools in the state of New Jersey and across the country. Then finally, enhancing curriculum design. We went and we visited another school district in New Jersey, the West Windsor Plainsboro District, and we were absolutely amazed with the program they had. And we're going to try to emulate that next year here by designing a level 1 curriculum that is a standard level 1 curriculum for all languages. So it's not going to be level 1 French and level 1 Spanish. It'll be level 1. The idea behind it is that it is a lot more communicative. It's not textbook based. So you have no textbook. We have a book as a reference, the book that we already possess as a school, but we're not going to be going page 23, chapter 1. We're going to move beyond that and instill that through thematic vocabulary, thematic units in each one of the languages. The outlier to that is going to be Chinese because it's a little bit different from the others, but we're hoping to gain some progress with that this summer. And next is Mr. DeLessio with science.
Thank you for coming this evening and allowing me to talk a little bit about the science department goals and our collaborations this year. So we had, two goals for the year. One was expanding our reading across the curriculum for both the science department and the English language arts department, and we'll talk about how we are continuing that into the future also. And of course, developing co-taught classes with the fine arts department, PE, health, world language, and actually English also. So those were our two goals. Our evidence is The Martian. This was a read for all our 9th grade students last year. I believe, at least in my time at Watch on Hills, this is the first time that there was actually a reading that was promoted by the science or math department for all students coming in. The Martian was a movie a few years ago, but it was a book before that. It was a required reading for all 9th grade students last year, and the biology teachers incorporated excerpts of the book into their lessons, ranging from cellular energetics, ecology, and plant biology. But all the other teachers also used it too, even though it was only a 9th grade read last year. The chemistry teachers used portions of the book to study chemical equations and quantities within those equations, how that was used. And if you've seen the movie, he was very, Matt Damon, who played, I forgot his name, the astronaut's name, was very calculated in how he figured out what type of reactions to do and the quantities in those. Obviously, there's a huge physics part of the book, and they used physics teachers used analytical portions to discuss kinematics, that's the study of motion, space flight, astronomy, and so forth. There was a lot of excitement with the students, the 9th grade students, when they came in with the book, because it was a very interesting read, a little different for them. And the feedback we got is they enjoyed reading it, and they did read it. That was the big feedback we got. So much that we're going to use it again next year for the incoming 9th graders. They're going to be required to read The Martian, and we'll go through the same thing next year, enhance our lessons. But the big push is the science teachers really enjoyed having the English language arts part of their goal this year. They all read the book, at least they told me they all read it, and I did quiz them a little bit, but they all read it. And we had a discussion about whether it would be meaningful to have the 10th grade class, that is this current 9th grade class going into the 10th grade next year, to do another reading along with the 9th graders doing The Martian. And we had a discussion on the types of books, and we came up with Ender's Game, which was also a movie, but a very good book. It's a science fiction book. Also has a lot about life struggles for teenagers, especially teenage boys, and I think that's a very good beginning of the book, beginning of the school year book for students to read. Our chemistry teachers are going to be the lead teachers on that book this year. We're going to incorporate it in all our classes, just like the bio teachers were the lead teachers last year. The chemistry teachers will use Ender's Game, and Tim so happily brought me the book a couple weeks ago, so we have 40 copies for the staff right now, and they're starting to read it. The evidence of progress that we had with our second goal, which was interdisciplinary. You've heard a lot already this evening regarding that, and the physics and arts students this year. So we had collaborations with Mr. Bertelli in the arts and physical education and department. Students in physics and arts studied spectrograms, as Mr. Bird talked about, studying sound and light waves in the pack. Very interesting study that they did. In fact, the physics students are studying waves right now as they end the year. The PE and physics department hypothesized predicted speed, momentum, momentum and velocities of different masses of people by using the Adventure Ed course, and that was great because students were able to go out into the Adventure Ed course and use a lot of the technology that we have to capture data such as velocity and acceleration and wind speed, and put that all into kinematics and momentum and energy and come up with things. The biology teachers in the arts department examined how angles and symmetry and patterns appear in the natural world. They did sketching of different types of biological events and learned how to sketch the correct way, really through the guidance through being guided by the arts teachers. Mr. Kutch is going to talk about an aerospace world language problem-solving cooperative experience that we have. Yes, we have an aerospace course here where students study flight. It's part of our engineering courses, although it's not a Project Lead the Way course. That was very interesting. And biology and arts also did looking at effects of exercise on cellular respiration through data collection. So they did passive and vigorous exercise activity in the gym and measured CO2 output, O2 input using our probes that we have in the department. Chemistry and arts worked with worked with the properties of metals and designing patterns for jewelry, understanding why certain jewelry items look better than others because of properties with metals. So it was a very fruitful experience for the department. It was the first time, like they had said, that like many of the departments having interdisciplinary, and it worked out very well. We have two big departments with the physical education and arts department and science, but they found their niches together, which was very nice. So right now, I'm gonna ask Brad to come up and introduce this. It's the collaboration with Mr. Kutch.
We did a project this year with aerospace where the Spanish students in the upper level Spanish, and this is a 4 honors course, had to take a situation that they were uncomfortable with, which in this case was the principles of flight, talk about the principles of flight with some exactitude in Spanish, so that meant they had to learn all of the specific vocabulary and understand the concepts behind the principles of flight. And they were going to do that through a paper airplane contest. So they had to be able to explain the process by folding a paper airplane, talking about the different parts of the airplane, the different elements and the principles of flight behind it, and then actually demonstrating that. We joined with the aerospace students, and the aerospace students met with the world language students, and that's where Mr. Kutch and his students came in. He can explain. They treated the Spanish students as if they were the clients, that they had to give them the specific information, talk to them about the principles of flight, what is involved, and then they came back to us and we did the paper airplane part.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. This was a great project. I have to say, my kids were thrilled. This happened about halfway through the school year, and they were asked to be to take on this job outside of the ordinary curriculum, where they would explain how aircraft fly, but do it with an audience in mind. So they were hired as consultants. So they learned real fast that the scientific method needs to be applied to not just science, but to communicating with people as well and solving a problem. In this case, the problem wasn't a scientific problem per se, but it was a problem of communications. So they had to learn how to establish a goal, determine how to achieve that goal, and then assess the level of achievement. So very much like a teacher, very much like somebody in industry or business, they had to set a goal of creating a presentation to help their clients understand flight and understand the terminology so that they could in turn do the project that Mr. Comerford just spoke about. And what we witnessed was fabulous. I mean, the students worked together great. They were excited about meeting with their Spanish cohort members and explaining things, and it was interesting to hear when they got back to the classroom, then comparing notes about what worked with one group and what worked with another. They got to see real fast that they had to temper that analytical approach. I mean, I had some students come to me saying, boy, you know what, if the rate of change of a function defined by a trig function is just another trig function, we should just go and they realized real quick that
that's not the scope of what they needed to do. And I thought they performed brilliantly. They dressed up like consultants. Everybody was wearing a tie and very professional, and they had their bottles of water in their presentation, nice little folders. And it continued beyond the presentation because the students who they presented to had to fill out a survey through Google Forms, so they got to use Google Forms, and see how much of what they explained sunk in. And also it gave them an online venue to address further questions. And it was a great experience. I'm looking forward to doing it again next year.
Thank you. I think that is it. Can we go on? Ms. Fallon is up next. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for inviting us here. Obviously, it's impossible to sum up all the wonderful things that our students learn and our students teach us every day. Instead of trying to highlight a few of our favorites or trying to go back to one or two slides or innovative interdisciplinary projects you didn't hear about, you've been sitting for an hour and a half, so I will be quick. The one thing, though, I think is nice to sum up all the work that we've done is a question I used to use in my English class, so what, okay? When we think about all you saw tonight and all you heard tonight, I think I speak for the administration and the teachers and the students that the strategic plan did influence us. A lot of these ideas were generated with members, sure, on October 1st and October 2nd, 2015. And it's really nice, I think, to look at what we've all learned, students, teachers, administrators, this year about the power of teamwork and creating synergy, the strength of knowing our own competencies, marveling, of course, over technology, that's from Mr. Twizzler, but more importantly, how empathy, initiative, and leadership can evolve and flourish if the work is challenging and the adults involved are willing to demonstrate and celebrate our students' differences in motivation, perspective, and passion. We all learn to be better communicators, to be more patient with one another, and to value our common humanity. We also developed tenacity. We returned to problems despite being impatient, exhausted, or frustrated. And those of you who work outside of the Board of Education know what it means to develop those skills. We learned to apologize. We also learned to laugh sometimes in order to see a way forward. But we saw that way forward together with an improved, diverse perspective. So I thought I would close with an acknowledgement that these projects and strategies are still in a case of becoming, just like my AP students were so many years ago. We also share a belief that we all can do better tomorrow than we're doing today. But in Beth Scheideman's words, we are beginning to break down the silos finally. We have an intense desire to learn more about each other in order to learn more about the skills we as teachers and students possess. This collaboration also grew out of our love of high schoolers, and I think you saw some of that tonight, right? And their ability to light up the room and to ask us terrific questions about the world. But as board members, I think one thing you should be very proud of is at Watchung Hills we've created a culture where our students are empowered and our teachers are innovative. Both stakeholders' voices matter. We as teachers acknowledge that we do not always know the answers, and that sometimes the power of collaboration can help us help one another to strategize different ways to solve the problem in front of us. After the last hour and a half, I'll leave you with one essential question. Is there anyone who sat through this presentation who doubts that our students have been given by our talented teachers the tools to succeed in an increasingly complex and ever-changing world? Thank you again for your support.
Thanks very much for that wonderful presentation. Obviously very detailed, and we're only getting a glimpse of it, but it's amazing things that we see. I wonder if any board members want to ask any questions or have any comments for the faculty and supervisors.
With your disciplinary learning, the collaboration has just been amazing. So congratulations.
Hey, I would just say, I want to thank all of you for your presentations, but, the fact that you're putting all this together is a tremendous amount of work, but it's so helpful for us as a board to see this in action and really understand the things that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Just one other comment, and from a practical perspective, for those of you who may or may not have been at other meetings where we have budgetary discussions, when the culinary arts room was having issues and we were thinking about, do we invest more, do we invest less? I mean, this was just a perfect example of how that was leveraged into many interdisciplinary ways, both educationally as well as financially, that shows us that I think we made the right decision in making the investment rather than not. And so this kind of feedback, I think, is very helpful to us in trying to make the best decision that we can within the limited financing that we have. Any other comments from you? I suspect that some of you have other things you may wish to do with your time, so we're going to take a quick 5-minute break to allow those who wish to escape to do so, and then we'll continue with our regular agenda.